You know, I really want to, first off, did you, Jay and Annalisa and Greg, Greg, Jason are back from the Philippines. Stand up, guys, wave your hands. From the Philippines with us this morning. You're going to be hearing a lot about them in the days to come. They got a lot of good stuff going on, just good stuff happening everywhere in their lives, and just so good to have you guys home. Just, you know, they come and they stay at our house, and Jay's like my brother, and just Annalisa, I tolerate her. And one time we were driving in the Philippines, and Annalisa was speaking and talking, and I said, I got a scripture for you, and she said, what is it? I said, women keep silent in the church. I don't know why, that didn't go over very well for some reason, you know. I love Annalise. I tease her all the time. You know, I was thinking about Faith Center this morning, and I was thinking about our fathers here at Faith Center. And I was thinking about, you know, just different people, you know, just like Dave White and Byron and Mofford, Wayne, Bruce, Mario, Trent, you know, so I'm just so Jordan just, you know, posting on Instagram. Jordan posts on Instagram more than most of our Instagram people, and every other one is some video of his child, and I love that. I love that. And I think about, you know, Mike and Dillman and different guys, and just, you know, Jesse and Jesse and just different people, Tim Randall. And I could go on and on and on and talk about all the Gene over here, Gene White, and I could talk about all the guys that we have in this church that are just, and it just goes on. Pastor Jerry, and, you know, Jerry, when the scripture said replenish the earth, him and Mary took that seriously. So that was our calling to do that, you know, 7 kids later. And just, you know, so many amazing guys, and Io, and, you know, and just so many amazing guys in our church. And if I didn't mention your name, obviously, just too many guys to mention. But I'm so proud of you guys. I just want to say, as the pastor of this church, I'm so proud of the fathers that you become. I'm so proud of my son, Joel, and watching him with his kids, and up here leading worship, and it's weird, people call him, hey, Pastor Joel. I'm thinking, who are you talking about? I'm saying, well, that's my kid, you know. It's no longer baseball player Joel, it's Pastor Joel. It's just an honor of my life. There's no greater joy to me than to see Faith Center families come together, and you know, I think about some of you single mamas here that are, and you're on our heart a lot. You guys are on our heart a lot, and you got children. And the advice I could give you is make sure that you get your kids to church every chance you get, because there will be a father influence in their life from church, youth groups and different things, and there will be a fatherly influence. And you stick around long enough, somebody will help you in that raising of those kids. And also, if you're looking to get married, we have a matchmaking you know, process that we do here. And most of our single gals are way outclass anybody, so we just don't let them get married. They're so single good. So, but just my heart to yours this morning. Thanks, gentlemen, for all you do at Faith Center Church, and just so many of you guys, and Eric and different people. They're just good fathers and good grandfathers, and if I could say anything, if we want to make and keep America the amazing country that it is, just keep doing your thing. Just keep doing that right there. You say, well, we can't. Just keep doing your thing. That's exactly right. And so I honor you today. You know, I was thinking about Galatians 3:13. It says, Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us, for it is written, curses everyone that hangs upon a tree. And, you know, and then the next verse, which I didn't throw in my notes, see if I can quote it. He says that he talks about that the blessing of Abraham might come upon the Gentiles. Well, who's this Abraham guy? Well, I mean, who's this Abraham guy? Well, Romans kind of gives us a kind of a backstory, a little bit of him. And you can go back to Genesis chapter 12. It starts there, and then 14, and several chapters in there. But the whole deal with Abraham is found in, kind of the wrap up here a little bit is found in Romans chapter 4, verse 13 through 22. And it says, "For the promise that he would be the heir of the world was not to Abraham or to his seed through the law, but through the righteousness of faith. For if those who are of the law are heirs, faith is made void, and the promise made of no effect, because the law brings about wrath. For where there is no law, there is no transgression. Therefore, it is of faith that it might be according to grace, so that the promise might be sure to all seed, not only to those who are of the law, but also to those who are of the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. It is written, I've made you a father of many nations, in the presence of God who believe God, who gives life to the dead, and calls those things which do not exist as though they did, contrary to hope, in hope believes, so that he might become the father of many nations, according to what was spoken. So your descendants be, and not dead since he was about or did not consider his own body already dead since he was about 100 years old, or the deadness of Sarah's womb. He did not waver at the promise of God through unbelief, but was strengthened in faith, giving glory to God, and being fully convinced that what he had promised he was also able to perform. Therefore it was accounted to him for righteousness." It's interesting when you think about it. It's interesting that it's interesting to me that when God wanted to do this whole gospel thing, when he wanted to put this whole thing together, he did it through fatherhood. Think about that. He said, I'm going to make you a father of many nations. And Sarah, of course, became the mother of many nations. But he did this whole thing through fatherhood. God's plan is not religion, folks. God's plan is not some kind of... It's always amazing to me when religions have, you got to cut this off, and you got to be here at this time, and you got to grow that out, and you got to eat this certain thing, and you got to do all those kind of things, and all this kind of stuff. And the Father did all those kind of things because he loved people and wanted to protect them. It wasn't out of some kind of religious thing. And now we've made it the way to the Father is if I eat a certain way, or if I grow my hair out, or if I don't grow my hair out, or if I pray this certain way, and so on and so forth. But really this whole thing boils down to one thing, and that's just simply a father and his family. And that's what we're a part of, is a father and his family. I was thinking about, when I was a kid, I kind of my subtitle here is The Father I Wish I Knew. Some of you know my story, and I certainly don't need to belabor the point about my dad, but my dad, I want to tell you about my dad just a little bit here. You guys know, but my dad died at 63 years old, which is 3 years from now for me. And actually, Jay and I were out hunting, and we went into Jack's restaurant there, which was our daily thing to do. And the guy looks at me and says, "Are you Glen Johnson?" And I said, "Well, how does he know my name, And anyway, they had no way of getting a hold of me, but they sent a message that said, if a guy comes in there, his name's Glen Johnson, tell him his dad's in the hospital and needs him to come home. And so Jay and I came home from a hunting trip. My dad died, and the way he died was he retired from the Camas paper mill, and he was the pulp coordinator of the whole. So my dad was the guy who ordered pulp and made pulp and did all this kind of stuff. He was in a high demand executive position at the Camas paper mill. And every night after he would get off work, he would go down and he would buy, I don't know how much. At that time, I don't know how much beer he would buy, but he would basically fall asleep every night with a beer in his hand in his chair. And so then he decided to retire. So he retired at 55 years old, and he thought he was going to live a high life. But then alcoholism got him more and more and more, got the best of him. And I would call him up and say, "Hey, Dad, let's go to lunch next Tuesday." Yeah. Oh, I'm going to do it. And then he'd call me on Monday night. "I can't make it. Something came up." And I know it was just he could not be drunk. He could not be drunk for that lunch date. And so, you kind of look back on those things. And the way my dad passed was he lived in a mobile home in a park, and he was, he left us kids a little bit of money. It wasn't a lot, but about 50,000 apiece for 5 kids, so he's had a little money. So it wasn't a poor pauper man. But the way he died was he would forget to eat. He would forget to eat food because he was so thin guy, and so he would forget to eat because he was drunk all the time. So he had this plan, a thought, and I'm thinking this through. He didn't say this, but I'm thinking this is what happened. Is he went to Costco and he bought vitamins and thought, well, if I can't eat, at least I'll get nutrition. So he would take vitamins and he would forget to eat, and the vitamins ate a hole in the wall of his stomach, and he bled to death. Basically, he bled so bad that and he lived for a few days after that, but his heart was so bad that he bled out. And when he's laying there hemorrhaging, he made a phone call to 911 and didn't call any of his kids because none of us had a relationship with him. Not one of us 5 kids had a relationship with him at that time. And it wasn't because we didn't like our dad. It wasn't because he was a bad man. It wasn't like he treated us evil. He was just absent from our lives. And so I think about the dad that I wish I had was the dad that I knew when I was 4 and 5 years old, who would come home from work, and he worked in the Camas paper mill, and would come home in our little tiny house that they paid $7,000 for. And my dad would go to work all day long, and he'd come home, and then he would, and I remember being 5, 6 years old, and he would, and I don't know how often this happened, you have these vague memories, but I remember my dad coming home, and he would challenge me on how many push-ups I could do. And so I got to the place, where it's like, oh, okay, Dad. So then I'd knock out 30 push-ups when I was like 6 years old. I'd knock out 30 push-ups, And then he'd get in the corner and he'd do inverted push-ups. And I'm thinking, but that dude's my hero. Inverted push-ups in the corner. I mean, I can't even stand on my head, let alone do an inverted push-up. And then I remember him chasing me all over the yard and catching me and then getting me down and sticking his knees on my arm so I couldn't move, and then going like this on my chest. Joel's going, that's where Dad got that. But he'd pound on my chest like this, and I'd struggle to get away, and I'd be so mad at him, and then I remember the times when we would be driving in the car, and my mom and dad would be in the front, and my sister and I, especially my brother came along 4 years after me, so I don't remember him being involved. This probably was. But my sister and I would, we'd get down on the floorboards and we'd drop marbles and stuff through the rust holes in the floorboards, and that was our seatbelt. Was the lower you went to the floor, the better, We'd look at the pavement out the holes of the thing, and we'd drop, Anybody from that era, I mean, when we went swimming up the Washougal River, we piled 14 kids in the back of a pickup and just went, and it was never dangerous back then. But apparently it got really dangerous in 2019. It's really dangerous to do that, but it wasn't dangerous back then. But my mom and dad, for some reason, and I didn't come from, nobody played an instrument in my family except I had an aunt, or kind of a cousin of my dad. She played in the Brush Prairie Tavern. She played piano in the Brush Prairie Tavern. Eileen Weisenborn was her name. If you guys know her, you've been too long around here. But so we didn't have any family that played instrument. But I remember my parents singing to the top of their lungs driving down the road. Frankie and Johnny were lovers. Oh Lordy, how they could love. And then Frankie gets involved. Shot that man through a hardwood door. And then we sing, they're the biscuits in the army, they say are mighty fine. One rolled off the table and killed a buddy of mine. I don't want no more of army life. See, nobody's singing along with me. That means, you guys are. But I remember those times of just being. I had an incredible childhood growing up until my dad succumbed to alcohol. And then it was to the place where, he was married 4 times, and we would get to a place where after Theresa and I were married, he would try to, if he had a wife, he would remember birthdays. If not, he wouldn't remember birthdays. And so probably the last 10, 15 years of my life, my dad didn't ever call me on my birthday because he was too drunk to remember my birthday. And so I'm not saying all this for sympathy, because I have great examples. My father-in-law is sitting here today who drank most of his life, and one day my mother-in-law, who I love with all my heart, said to him, "You're going to lose your family." And he went and quit drinking. He was drinking, he would get a thing of vodka so big, and then he'd put a little orange juice in it to make it look like it was a screwdriver, but really vodka that was colored orange. Right, Pops? And he drank for so many years, and he just one day said, "I'm done with it." And he put it down and hasn't drank since. And he's a great example to me. I love my Pops. I love Pops with all my heart. He's a great example of, you know, a father that hangs in there. So I guess for me, I'm just so proud of my fathers in Faith Center Church, because a lot of you make my story look mild, and I mean your story makes my story look mild in comparison, and I think that it's a real testimony, really, to a wonderful, loving Heavenly Father that had a plan for me. When I was heading down my Father's footsteps plans, the Father had another plan for me, and all I had to do was connect to His plan. When I connected to His plan, you know, I have the greatest family. I have the greatest grandbabies that you could ever have. They're way cuter than your grandbabies. Whoa, don't throw stones. Don't throw stones. Grandmas and grandpas, is there anything better than grandkids? It's amazing. And then Sarah made that real public official announcement today that she's having a third baby, which we've known about for a while. So little Glenny's going to be here in a little while. Don't know his name. Joel hopes it's a boy, but we'll see. So the father I wish I knew is the father that started off good but didn't end strong. I say to you, if you didn't start off good, you can end strong. Amen? So I was thinking about, just real quick, the differences between you know, the way I read an article recently. I just wanted to share with you a little bit different. This is where, you know, I feel like I'm just having a heart talk pastor to my friends today. But I read this article is by a guy's name is Glen Statton. It was on Focus on the Family, and he talks about the difference between. I don't know if this is politically correct, but did you know there's a difference between men and women? There actually is. I don't know if that's politically correct, but there's a difference. And so, and moms, I think one of the things we can do, let me just share with you 5 or 6 differences that fathers bring to a family. See, I think that fathers have to answer a question that mothers answer a lot of questions, but fathers answer questions to their girls and to their boys. They answer the question to their girls, they ask this question. Girls ask this, and they find out from their father, am I lovely? Am I do I have self-worth? And fathers answer that question by how they treat their girls. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, our girls get to be 13 or 14 and we don't want to hug them anymore because they went through puberty and all that kind of stuff. That's when you need to be the most aggressive hugging father you can be. Because they're looking for emotion from somebody, and if they don't get it from you, they're going to get it from little Johnny, and little Johnny needs a whipping. So let's just, you know. Because little Johnny might have been little Glenny. That hurts to the heart. My wife says, Glenny definitely need a whipping. Yeah, he did. So, where was that when I was so rudely interrupted by the first lady of this house? Anyway, so let me just share with you a couple thoughts, just different thoughts that probably, so the girls, we answer the question, are we lovely? The boys, we answer, when do I become a man? And apparently, fathers have not answered that question at 18. They usually answer that when they're like 35 today. And we need to start answering that question a lot earlier. You know, it's a different world, and I think we've stunted the growth of our boys a little bit. I don't know, I'm not even getting to my message, I'm just sharing from my heart. But we've stunted our boys a little bit in that, you know, like I remember mowing lawns when I was, you know, 8, 9, 10 years old, mowing lawns for $2, you know. I remember going out and, you know, like the whole neighborhood going fishing at Lacamas Lake, because I lived in Camas, went fishing at Lacamas Lake, and we'd leave at 2 o'clock in the morning and go out, and, you know, here's our 9, 10-year-old kids leaving to go to fishing at 2 o'clock in the morning. I remember my mom, and I'm talking about us growing up a little bit, but I remember camping at Cougar Campground, which was our highly, highly expensive vacations we went on every year. We were camping at Cougar Campground, and I asked my mom, can I go swimming? It was early in the morning, I was up, you know, I've always been early riders, can I go swimming? And she said, yeah, sure, go ahead. So I went down, and the swimming hole was empty, and I was swimming by myself. And another lady came down with her son, and she looked at me and she said, how old are you? I said, 7. So I was swimming by myself at Cougar Campground when I was 7 years old. We don't let our kids go in the front yard when they're 7 years old now. You know, I remember between my 6th and 7th grade year, I babysat sometimes for this couple, and this guy had a commercial fishing boat, and he needed somebody to go down there and work on the commercial fishing boat. So my parents sent me on a commercial fishing boat when I'm 13 years old. Child abuse, man. But I think a lot of it had to do with, you know, just a different world that we live in. I think parents, we can, you know, we probably need to think a little differently with that. Let me give you 6 quick things and get you out of here. We got some great food planned at our house today. What are you bringing, Bruce? Pulled pork? Brisket and pulled pork. Let's all stand and okay, here we go. Fathers, in this article, and I'm going to read some of the article, fathers play differently. Fathers tickle more. They wrestle and they throw their children in the air, while mothers say, no, not so high. Father expert John Snarry explains that children who roughhouse with their fathers learn that biting, kicking, and forms of physical violence are not acceptable. They learn self-control by being told that that's enough and when to settle down. Girls and boys both learn a healthy balance between timidity and aggression from their fathers. Interesting, isn't it? Number 2, fathers build confidence. Go to the playground, listen, and I'm reading some of these things from the article. Go to the playground, listen to parents. Who's encouraged the kids to swing or climb just a little higher? Ride their bike a little faster. Throw just a little harder. Who has encouraged the kids to be careful? Mothers protect and dads encourage to push the limits. I remember my dad. My dad grew up in Hawkinson, and he had the first, I wish he would have patented this, but he rode old Harley Davidsons. That's where I get my Harley thing. And he was the first one he actually put the clutch on the handle. They thought they could take the clutch off the floor, and he was the first one he knew of in the world that ever did that. And they just did it out of convenience because they were hill climbers. They hill climbed motorcycles back then. They go up and I remember my dad just totally drunk, and we were up at our cousin's house, the Weisenborns, up in Hawkinson, and we're up there, and my dad jumps on a bike. I'd never seen him ride before because he kind of got away from it, but he jumped on a bike with my sister on the back, and he pops a wheelie with my sister on the back and rides down the street and burnt her leg on the exhaust. And that's how I grew up. You know, we had this tree out. Is this all right this morning? You get this? So we had this tree out right across the street growing up, and this tree, I love this tree because it was a big maple tree. And us kids would get up in that maple tree, and then these new growth things would shoot up, and we'd be about 40, 50 feet up in the air, and we'd hang on, the wind would blow, and we'd be up there just, you know, going like this, you know. And we thought that was so cool to be 40 or 50, you know, feet up in there. And of course, my dad never said, don't do it. It's my mom, don't do that, don't do that, you never will climb that tree ever again. And I didn't, but it was like it stunted my growth and ruined my childhood because I couldn't do that. But my dad never told me stuff like that, you know. I saw my dad as this kind of just guy that was just all out, you know, just, I mean, whatever he did, he was all out. Fathers communicate differently. A major study shows that when speaking to children, mothers and fathers are different. Mothers will simplify their words and speak on children's level. Men are not as inclined to modify their language for the child. Yes, that's true. The mother's way facilitates an immediate communication. The father's way challenges the child to expand her vocabulary and linguistic skills and important building blocks in academic success. Number 4, fathers discipline differently. Oh, do they ever. Educational psychologist Carol Gilligan, or whatever her name is, tells us that fathers stress justice, fairness, and duty based on rules, while mothers stress sympathy and care and help based upon relationships. Fathers tend to observe and enforce rules systematically and sternly, teaching children there are consequences of right and wrong. Mothers tend towards grace and sympathy, providing a sense of hopefulness. Again, either of these disciplinary approaches by themselves is not good, but together they create a healthy, proper balance. So, Theresa and I, if there's anything we kind of have this little tension sometimes, is I'll say, that guy just needs to do that, and she'll, especially if it's Joel, and then she'll immediately come back and she'll give an excuse for Joel. And I'm always like, ah, and she goes, yeah, but he blah, 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 you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, oh, just be quiet. I don't want to hear that, you know. I think it's healthy for kids to fear to have a healthy fear of their dad. And I don't mean fear in the sense of, oh my gosh, dad's home. I mean a fear in the sense of, I want to please my father. And my dad told me when he divorced the first time, my mother, he divorced my mother. He came to me and he told me, he said, you know, you're about 13, 14 years old, you're 6'1", and he said, you will obey your mother, and he said, and I will back her, and if I have to come and beat you with a baseball bat, I will do it. And you know what? I took him seriously. So one day, I was mouthing off to my mother, and we were in a garden, which you will never find a garden that exists on my property. Well, maybe my wife once in a while, but there will never be a weed be pulled by these hands out of a garden. Never. These hands are for Roundup only. So one time this is the kind of house I grew up in. So I was bad-mouthing my mom. I was like 14. I was bad-mouthing my mom, and I started walking off. And she cold-cocked me with a shovel on the back, right in the back. I wish I had child services number at that time. Because if I did, once they left, my dad would come down and beat me. That's just... Fathers definitely discipline differently. Fathers prepare children for the real world. Involved dads help children see the attitudes and behaviors and have consequences. For instance, fathers are more likely than mothers to tell their children that they're not, if that's not nice, or they're not nice to others. Kids will not want to play with them. So in other words, you don't treat people nice. So if they don't do well in school, they will not get into college or secure a desirable job. Fathers help children prepare for the reality of harshness of the world. You know, it's like one of those things where, you know, I think it just helps us to be honest with that area. And then last thing is, fathers provoke a look at the world of men. This is important for young ladies. Men and women aren't different, or men and women are different. They eat differently, they dress differently, they cope with life differently. Girls and boys who grow up with a father are more familiar and secure with the curiousness of a world of men. Girls with involved married fathers are more likely to have healthier relationships with the opposite sex because they learn from their fathers how to proper men act towards women. They know which behaviors are inappropriate. They also have a healthy familiarity with the world of men. They won't wonder how a man's facial stubble feels or what it's like to be hugged by strong arms. This knowledge builds emotional security and safety from the exploitation of predatory males. Boys grow up with dads are less likely to be violent. They have their masculinity affirmed and learn from their fathers how to channel their masculinity and strength into positive ways. Fathers help sons understand proper male sexuality, hygiene, behavior, age-appropriate ways. As noted in psychologist David Popenoe explains, fathers are more than just second adults in a home. Involved fathers, especially biological fathers, bring positive benefits to their children that no other person is likely to bring. So let me tell you this, and then I'm done. When I see that there is something that happened on the news and some 22-year-old boy shoots up something, does something, the first thing I ask is, I want to know, was the father involved? Was a father really heavily involved in that kid's life? And generally speaking, there's always exceptions to the rules, and some mother will come up to me and, criticize me for what I said this morning. Whatever, I get all that. I mean, I understand all that, because there's exception to every rule. But the reality is, about 99% of the time, when young men get themselves in trouble, they're generally had an absent father in their life. And so I just want to say again, thanks, Faith Center fathers. You guys are the joy of my life, watching you parent your children. And many of you call me and ask for advice. And it's no greater joy to me than to watch. I see Trent. Where's Trent? Right here, Trent. Trent came into our church, kind of a drug addict guy. And now I see on Facebook, and people are thanking Trent for his fatherhood in their life and different things that he puts into different people. No greater joy than that to me. No greater joy than that to me. And, the thing it is, guys, is, I'm not really preaching a sermon to him, just talking this morning, but you can't, your kids make choices. Some of them just make stupid choices. And you can't take all that stuff personal, because you just do the best you can do. But kids this still comes down to a choice. If you raise a kid in an absolute perfect home with absolute perfect parents, which don't exist, but if they did exist, absolute perfect parents, your child he'll still make a choice towards Jesus somewhere down the road, because if your influence was 100% pure that they would make the right decision, then that really gives up their free will. And God had two sons, and one of them went awry, and he had Satan, and he was in heaven, and he went awry. So people when you have a free choice, there's a free choice. So there's no condemnation. There's no condemnation in this room for that. Let's just be the best fathers we can be, and let's preserve the generation of the United States of America by just loving our wives, loving our children, and just when we get to heaven, I just want the Lord to say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Let's give all of our dads a hand today. Can we do that? The greatest joy of my life is being a father. Greatest joy of my life, and a father and grandfather. And the greatest joy of my life is watching my son kiss his little girl and kiss his little boy. And that's just nothing greater than that. And that's just, there's a lot more to life than money. And money's great, and we enjoy it and all that kind of stuff, and have all you want. But don't sacrifice family for money. Amen. Stand up with me. Thanks you. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Stand up with me, guys. If you're with your spouse there, just hold hands. If you want a spouse, grab somebody's hand. I'm just kidding. How many single people we got in this room right now? How many single people? How many single? How many? Come on, raise your hand. I know, I would be too. Raise your hand up. Okay, look around right now. Is there any matchmaking we can do right now? Hey, we got to make this thing happen pretty quick. Some of you are not getting any younger, We got to make this thing happen pretty quick. I'm not going to even pray over that one. I'll see you later. Have a good day.